Alright, are we in? Are we in? I think we're in, yeah. I just need to fix some things on the stream's end. So please bear with me. Hmm. Alright. Oh, forget it. Um. Oh boy. There's going to be some definite kind of great stuff today. We have the darkest moments in TV history. I just ate. Warning, flashing lights show. This is gonna get a little freaky. So if you're spooked very easily, uh, well, um, you should you should probably consider forget it. Play the video.
It was a typical day in the world of daytime television.
The heck is this?
Infomercials, soap operas, and highly scripted legal shows filled viewer screens.
Bro,
With one of the more popular at the time being a program called Christina's Court.
Today in Christina's Court.
I never watched this show, man.
The show centered around a woman named Christina Perez, giving counsel and advice to those wrapped up in legal drama. And on this particular morning, comedian Sean Harris would be featured filing suit against his ex-girlfriend in the hopes of recouping unpaid rent.
Every month it would be something different, you know.
Like
I'm
what?
I ain't got it this month because I got to do this or that. I'm like, man.
So you let her go 9 months without paying rent?
Now, like I said, these shows were very obviously scripted, at least to some degree. And with Sean himself being a professional comedian, it led to countless funny moments and what turned out to be one of the show's more iconic episodes, with by far the most memorable moment coming at the very end, when things seemed to deviate from the script.
Constantly like a child in my
People
own
in
house.
love, they yell at each other all the
Oh,
time.
that's true.
Don't
Ask
have
him, he's
nothing to
been
do.
married for how long?
Over 27.
Over 20.
Look at him though. He look mad.
Oh, look at that. He looks
You
mad.
don't look happy, brother. You don't look happy.
Here, we see the comedian take aim at Christina's bailiff, a man named Renard Spivey, who was
Bailiff,
an integral
come and get
part
this
of the
man.
show, being the judge's sidekick for years and years. Though it wasn't often that he found himself at the end of a joke like this, as Sean suggests that Renard looked unhappy when it was revealed that he had been married for over 27 years.
He's very happy. Okay, all right, let's get back to the queen.
All in all, it made for a rather charming moment, with viewers adoring the lighthearted jab aimed at one of the show's most beloved characters.
Characters? That's a real guy.
Though no one could have known at the time just how true that joke about his happy marriage would turn out to be.
Still developing tonight, a Harris County Sheriff's deputy facing serious charges. 63-year-old
the
Renard Spivey
bailiff?
accused of killing his wife, 52-year-old Patricia Spivey, after an argument that turned deadly.
The bailiff?
On July 28th,
I was expecting
2019,
one of the- I was
over a
expecting one
decade
of the
after
people
the
with the
aforementioned
bailiff?
program aired, Renard Spivey was confronted by his wife Patricia about what she believed to be steroid use or perhaps even infidelity. And in the midst of this heated argument, Spivey would draw his gun and shoot his wife once in the arm and then in the chest.
I didn't know they gave
Shortly
bailiff,
after, police would
bailiffs
find
guns,
her lifeless
man.
body crumpled in their bedroom closet. Now, after years and years of taking part in this once famed legal show, Spivey can be found alone in his prison cell, where he'll likely remain for the next 14 years of his life
What happened to the
for
show?
murdering the woman that he was so happily married to, turning what was once one of Christina's Court's most iconic moments into one of the darkest examples of irony in all of television history.
When you find a good woman, you got to hang on for dear life, because then it's hard to find another.
Yeah,
That's
Crow
my advice. A happy
presents.
woman.
Oh my
Married woman.
god, what the filter? What the filter? What the filter?
Before we get any further, I want to thank Scentbird for sponsoring this video and in turn making this dark content financially viable for myself.
Oh
Scentbird
my
is a fragrance subscription.
Why doesn't YouTube pay their people?
The world of television is an interesting one. Despite the highly controlled and well-polished products that we're typically used to seeing on our screens, there have been a surprisingly high number of deeply disturbing moments that have happened when on air, and this potentially new series aims to highlight some of the most disturbing. And what better way to start than with a relatively unknown case that has haunted me for years. Saturday, June 14, 2008, a Japanese TV station called Television Miyazaki is running its standard live programming, which on this day was set to feature a game show-like segment in the remote rice fields of Takachi Hocho. The game
middle of
itself
a
was
rice
simple.
field.
Competitors stood back-to-back on a small wooden stand above the shallow muddy water below, and when given the cue, they would attempt to shove their opponent into the water without turning their bodies around. In the end, the one left standing on the platform would be declared the winner, with the loser
Twilight
being
Zone.
left humiliated in the mud.
Albert Dryden.
Round 1 goes off without a hitch, resulting in the losing contestant being covered head to toe in
Round
a
one.
thick brown sludge, with the whole atmosphere perfectly encapsulating the craziness and high-energy charm that you would expect from a Japanese game show made at the time. And so far, everything was all in good fun, with this excitement only escalating as the contestants convinced one of the show's hosts, a man named Tatsuchi Yanagita, to join in on the competition.
Yeah.
It took some convincing, but eventually Tatsuchi agrees to compete, much to the enjoyment of everyone spectating. And from there, the comedy writes itself, as immediately after the round starts, it's apparent that he stood little to no chance.
He's cooked.
And upon instantly losing his balance, Tatsuki reacts in a split second and dives off the platform, landing headfirst into the muddy water below, which causes his body to fall limp.
That was a pretty stupid decision. Honestly, he should
The
have
water
just
that
taken
he had just dove into was merely 6 inches deep, with the rest consisting of a thick layer of mud, which his head would strike directly, instantly
he's
causing
stuck.
his neck to break.
Oh,
And in that
his
very
neck
moment,
broke.
Tatsuchi would be irreversibly paralyzed, leaving him unable to move from the neck down. It was a tragic accident. However, the accident itself is far from the most awful part of this live broadcast, with that coming immediately after. Unaware of Tatsuchi's severe injury, the crew believed that he was merely playing a prank on them and just joking around, and so they left him there, face first in the water, and proceeded to shove his face even deeper and deeper into the mud, splashing even more on top of his head to rub in the fact that he had lost.
I can't believe people.
They had no idea that during their antics, Tatsuchi was in a desperate fight for survival, as in those 6 inches of water, he was slowly drowning, and completely unable to pick up his head to breathe. This lasts for an excruciatingly long 15 seconds, before they begin to bob his head up and down, and eventually pull Tatsuchi's face out of the water. But this reprieve was short-lived, as the contestants proceed to drop him back into the mud face first. It is so incredibly painful to watch, and made all the more disturbing with the over-the-top hysterical laughter coming from everyone around him, who are completely oblivious to the situation in front of them. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Tatsuchi is hoisted above the water, and the camera switched back to the main broadcast, ending both Tatsuchi's and the viewer's pain. By some stroke of good fortune, Tatsuchi would survive the ordeal, but just barely, as it's estimated that even just a few more seconds in that mud would have likely led to his death. But thankfully, this wasn't the case, and according to his Facebook page, Tatsuchi has learned to live with his body-wide paralysis, and even went on to rejoin the show years later in some capacity, ending this entry off on somewhat of a bright spot, despite this otherwise being one of the more unsettling and appalling broadcast accidents that I've ever seen.
He should have sued. I mean, good on him for learning to live with it, but he should have sued.
Donald Herbert had been in a coma for the previous...
Wake up with Donald. Wake
On
up
the
with
topic
Donald.
of broadcasts that have left an impression on my life, I would say none have had more of an emotional impact than a story run by 60 Minutes about a man named Donald Herbert. The story starts back in 1995, just 4 days after Christmas, when a fire broke out in a home in Buffalo, New York. In an attempt to put out the blaze, firefighter Donald Herbert was standing on the roof of the building when suddenly it gave way. As a result, Herbert would fall into the attic where he would be trapped in the smoke, unable to breathe. He would lay there without oxygen for 6 whole minutes before they finally were able to pull his body to safety, with the whole ordeal being filmed and shown on local news. Somehow, Herbert managed to survive this accident, but being without air for that long caused him to lose most of his brain function, leading to him spending the following years in a minimally conscious state, unable to eat, unable to breathe, and seemingly unable to understand the world around him. Eventually, his condition led to him being placed in a nursing home, where a feeding tube was the only thing keeping him alive. For all intents and purposes, the man was gone. But then, something happened. On April 20th, 2005, a staggering 9.5 years after his accident, Donald Herbert woke up. In the nursing home where he had spent most of the years unresponsive, he would suddenly turn to a nurse and ask for his wife, Linda, while displaying signs of being fully lucid, which prompted the staff to immediately call his family, who rushed to see him. And sure enough, despite Herbert being completely blind, he was not only fully responsive, but recognized almost all of his family members. The moments following were all captured by cameras and later shown on an episode of 60 Minutes, with the footage being some of the hardest hitting and emotional that I've personally ever seen.
How long have I been gone?
Quite a while, pal. Quite a while.
9 years.
10 years.
Oh, 10
the pain
years.
in discovering that he had been gone for 10 years, all that time missed, robbed from a man who was just doing his job, is indescribably gut-wrenching. But it's what happens after this footage that proves to be the most upsetting part. For nearly 16 hours, the newly awakened man spoke with his family, catching up on every little detail that he had missed. And though from that point on he had moments going in and out of his lucidity, his long-term prognosis actually seemed hopeful. Throughout the next few weeks, Donald was surrounded by family members at all times, not only to take advantage of every single second that Herbert was awake, but also for his own safety as well, as since his awakening, he would thrash violently in his sleep, as if he still believed he was trapped in that blaze. And so to ensure his safety, at least one family member would be stationed with the man while he slept. Though on one night, one of the family members on duty had grown too exhausted to stay any longer, and from the first time since he became lucid, Donald Herbert was left alone. And during that night, he would again start to thrash violently, with Herbert flailing so hard that he would fall out of his bed and strike his head against the floor, causing his brain to start bleeding. From that moment on, Donald Herbert would never become lucid again, and as a result of his injuries, he would pass away 1 year later from pneumonia.
Human error again. Humans are so
anyone had ever
stupid.
thought that such a horrendous thing could happen, obviously we would have stopped.
The Twilight
Stop
Zone.
what?
Throughout its lengthy run,
Stop
this
what, bro?
television series provided some of the most entertaining and memorable moments in all of television. But for this section, I'm going to be cheating a little bit, as rather than looking at an event surrounding the show itself, I'll be highlighting the far less memorable movie version of the series.
Movie version?
Simply named Twilight Zone the Movie, the film was broken up into multiple sections, serving as sort of an anthology work with 3 separate storylines. And for the sake of this story, only one section and really only one scene bears discussion. The scene was intended to simulate a battle in the Vietnam War, in which the protagonist, a character played by actor Vic Morrow, is attempting to outrun an attack helicopter and escape the area. The footage was intended to serve as the section's dramatic conclusion, with it being described as the following. In the scene that served as the original ending, Bill, the character portrayed by Morrow, stumbles into a deserted Vietnamese village, where he finds 2 young Vietnamese children left behind when a U.S. Army helicopter appears and begins shooting at them. Morrow was to take both children under his arm and escape out of the village, as the hovering helicopter destroyed the village with multiple explosions. Based on that description alone, shooting the scene was going to be tricky and likely a very intense process on the set, as all the effects used were set to be done practically, meaning that they would require an actual helicopter and real pyrotechnics. Not only this, but the director, a man named John Landis, wanted to use actual child actors for the scene, which, given that it was planned to take place at night and near explosions, was technically illegal in the state of California. Despite the laws in place, however, Landis decided to shoot the scene regardless, enlisting 7-year-olds Mika Din Lee and 6-year-olds Renee Sheen Yi Chen to play the roles of the Vietnamese children. And with all the pieces now in place, the cameras began to roll on what was set to be the stunning conclusion to this particular section.
It was boom. Boom, boom.
As the scene starts, the spectacle of it all can't be understated, as the lighting, setting, and the pyrotechnics truly set a haunting tone. However, unbeknownst to the production team, there was a major problem developing. As stated prior, all the effects you see here are real, and during the scene there was an actual helicopter flying just above the actors, which by itself was already very dangerous, and made even more so due to the pyrotechnics. For the pilots, the explosions launched in the air created fireballs in the sky, making things much more difficult to navigate, but those on the ground were never made aware of this. And being pressed to make things look even more and more intense, the crew decided to double down on their explosions, launching 2 massive charges back to back. A decision that proved to be a costly one, as the second blast was so strong that it dislodged the helicopter's tail prop, causing the craft to spin uncontrollably. And within mere seconds, as the cameras roll on the 3 actors trudging their way through the water,
I need a soundboard for moments like these.
the craft crashes directly on top of them. Somehow, everyone on board the helicopter survived the wreck, though those on the ground weren't so lucky, as in one split second, the blade of the helicopter slashed into Vic Morrow and Mika Din Lee, instantly decapitating them. And as the craft slammed to the ground, Renee Shin Yi Chen would be crushed beneath its massive weight.
Triple kill.
In one frame, there were 3 living actors, and in the next, there were none. In retrospect, it's not hard to see the red flags and the dangerous practices being used by the production team. However, following several long legal battles, no one would be found liable in the deaths of the 3 actors.
Nobody.
Landis himself would go on to enjoy an incredibly successful career. The Twilight Zone film would eventually be released years later, only with a different ending.
Nobody got charged.
Oh, they're not going to demolish it. There's nobody will come in here. I'll fight force with force.
Oh, you'll do what with
Our
what
final
now?
story takes us to the quaint countryside of Buttsfield, England, where a man named Albert Dryden had been living a fairly solitary life. Following his retirement from steelworking, Albert dedicated his life to building up a plot of land which he had purchased in the area. His main goal was to construct a bungalow for his elderly mother where she could live during the summers, while also planning to build some sort of fallout bunker on the same plot. But right from the start, he ran into issues, as his permit request to build these structures on his land was promptly denied. This did not stop Dryden, however, as despite the ruling, he began his construction anyway, believing he had found a workaround with the law, as rather than building the house in a standard manner, he instead dug a deep hole into the ground and began to construct his home there, labeling it as the home in a hole. Due to this, the home only stood about 8 feet or so above the ground, which Dryden believed made the construction legal. However, he was wrong in his assumption, and the building swiftly caused a disagreement between the man and the Derwentshire District Council, with this rift growing more and more amplified as time went on. In the midst of this ordeal, a man named Harry Collinson was appointed as chief of the council and assigned to handle the case as his first order of business. And he did so by initially sending Dryden a letter demanding that he stop construction and also tear down what he had already built. Dryden, however, decided to counter with a court appeal, which was swiftly denied, leading to the court's final order that the building be demolished within 3 months. It was around the same time that the local news began to document the ongoing feud between Dryden and the government, and despite the numerous rulings against him, Dryden still refused to give in to the government's demands, and eventually, the council decided to take matters into their own hands, and decided to demolish the structure themselves. So on June 20th, 1991, Harry Collinson, a demolition team, and a group of police constables traveled to Dryden's property to demolish the structure. Before this group arrived, the decision was made that should Dryden attempt to escalate the situation, they were to immediately back off and come up with another plan to avoid any sort of physical altercation. At the scene, numerous reporters had already began gathering at the property line, including a cameraman for the BBC, who was there to document the feud in real time. And right from the start, it was clear that Dryden was not going to be going down without a fight. The gate to his property was chain-locked, with Dryden standing behind it, pointing to 2 letters that he believed proved that he should be able to keep his structure intact, at least for the time being.
Read that, that's an official letter, and there's an appeal here. There's an inspector coming out on this site in 5 weeks' time. But it doesn't show that.
There's an inspector.
Well, I have another letter confirming that. I'm not going to show you the other letter, but this chap's coming out in 5 weeks' time. Well, all as I'm asking is to wait 5 weeks for the outcome, maybe 6 weeks. It'll take a week after he's been out. I'm satisfied, Albert, but there's nothing in these documents.
I can't understand anything these people are saying. Nor can I keep track of it.
However, Dryden's request for more time was clearly falling on deaf ears, and realizing this, Dryden began to grow more and more agitated, with his tone quickly turning far more menacing.
If you don't open the gate, now we'll obviously have to take the fence down with the machine. So
if you don't open the gate, you're cooked, bro.
Time to remove the fence yourself.
Open the gate now, or else you're cooked.
Any damage that's subsequently caused,
we're gonna cook you.
Preventing us doing that.
We're gonna turn you from a hater to a tater.
Well, you
this
might
guy's
not be around
peak hater, bro.
to see the outcome of this disaster. Now, you've been warned.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I'm not going to explain, but if you had any sense, you would go away now and wait 5 weeks for the outcome of that.
Got
right?
chickens.
That's my last word on it.
If you show me the letter referring to the 5 weeks
I can't show you the letter. I've told you where the letter is.
At this point, based on their initial plan, the crew should have certainly turned back, as it was now getting to the point that Dryden was outright threatening Collinson, warning him that if he were to step on his property, that something awful was going to happen. And though this did cause Collinson to take a few steps back, he still remained steadfast in carrying out the task and remained on the edge of the property line, standing his ground even when Dryden escalates the situation even further.
This is not gonna...
What the Lord don't know? Go ahead, sir.
Can you get a shot of this gun?
Wearing an ugly sweater to the demolition.
As the two stand face to face, Dryden brandishes his pistol and points it directly at Collinson. And wanting to ensure the man's combative behavior was being documented, Collinson asks the cameraman to get a shot of his gun, which subsequently leads to this moment.
Can you get a shot of this gun?
Out of it.
In an instant, with cameras rolling, Dryden fires a shot directly into the chest of Harry Collinson, and then fires another at the crowd standing before him, leading to things devolving into a chaotic scene of running and screaming.
As more shots were fired from a pistol, the camera crew and Look North reporter Tony Belmont ran for cover.
We were standing watching what was going on, and then a shot rang out. The chief kind of fell to the ground, and I felt a shot in the arm, and I've clearly been shot here in the arm.
As the camera crew finally gets to a safe distance and catches their breath, it's revealed that one of the journalists for the BBC had been struck in the arm, along with one of the officers. Though in the midst of all this carnage, we see no sign of Harry Collinson, as by this point, he was likely still on the ground where he had originally fallen, dead from his gunshot wound, with his final words being,
"Can you get a shot of this gun?"
Out of it.
They were literally standing there taking photos of him holding the gun.
With Dryden, who claimed that he had set up booby traps and landmines, along with other explosives on the property, though this would turn out to be a bluff, and eventually he would be grabbed by officers and taken into custody, where he would subsequently be tried and sentenced to life in prison.
They literally got video
despite
evidence.
His actions on that day, Albert Dryden would go on to become somewhat of a national hero, growing a legitimate fan base for the way he stood up against the government. Dryden would live out his time in prison until 2017, when he suffered a massive stroke, to which he was let out on a compassionate release, with the man eventually passing away just 1 year later, though his actions that day will forever be immortalized as one of the most notorious and darkest moments in television history. I want to give a big thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check out those links below.
Who's the... Is this a feud? Do they got the feud? Oh, okay, this is the one. This is the one that I remember a lot.
January 11th, 2001, famed Brazilian actress, model, and singer Xuxa lands her prop spaceship on the stage of a Brazilian TV set and begins her show the way she always does. The program, titled Xuxa Park, was a hit for the Ready Global Network, targeting a demographic of young children with its over-the-top dance numbers, fun games, and immersive futuristic sets. Premiering back in the summer of '94, Xuxa Park had shown little signs of slowing down by the turn of the century, and seemed poised for a long, impressive run, barring any unforeseen disaster. On this particular day, 300 children were in attendance to watch or participate in the show's
Who wants a giant unforeseen disaster?
Activities. Xuxa's infectious energy led the way from segment to segment as they played games, showed cartoons, and of course sang their songs. And by the end of the episode, the crew had all gathered on stage to perform one last musical number to end things off with a bang. And evidently, that's exactly what would happen.
A bang? Oh, look at that dancing. I love the way they dance.
This frame was taken just over 1 minute later, revealing all that remained of the set, as within that impossibly short window of time,
oh, she's breaking it down, bro. She is breaking it down. I wish I had arrow keys on this thing.
Once bright and
she
inviting
is breaking it
was
down.
turned to a pitch black, unrecognizable hellscape, barely comprehensible to the camera, it was also just mere moments away from being swallowed by the flames, but not before it would capture the carnage firsthand.
Was anybody else aware that the thing was smoking? Like the camera, for example. Just look at it.
End of the set, as with
Look at it right here. It was literally billowing smoke. Did the camera not say anything like, "Hey, I think your spaceship is smoking, Zuza. I think your spaceship might be a little on fire. Yeah, just a teeny little bit dangerous. A teeny little bit, just a tiny little bit messed up. You know, it's probably getting a little bit freaky in there. You probably should take a look at that, or not. Just run away and take the children. Take the children too. They got the clowns running away. Too bad the car dealership people weren't spared.
in the blink of an eye, the spaceship which Shusha had rode in on and was moments away from re-entering to leave the set would catch fire, all while the dancers continued their performance, unaware of the emerging danger behind them. A member of the staff quickly enters the frame in an attempt to extinguish the flames, but it was already too late, as just a few seconds after the spark, the entire ship was engulfed by the blaze, causing a mass panic on the set. Worst of all, directly next to the fiery ship, and just barely out of view of the camera, was the show's signature Ferris wheel, which kids would ride during the program, including during this very moment. As the fire raged, one boy was trapped in his seat, helpless to the danger unfolding around him. And noticing this, a group of brave people on scene began desperately trying to free him, which can just barely be seen on the left-hand side of the screen. Thankfully, their attempts proved successful, as he was eventually freed from a seat and carried to safety.
Go!
The fire was later determined to have started by an electrical short circuit, and the set would soon be completely turned to ash and rubble. But as for the nearly 300 children and numerous staff on scene, despite multiple injuries, everyone had somehow managed to escape the building.
So the show's
with
cooked
their
now, right?
lives,
The show's cooked.
with the only reported fatality being the show itself, as this would be the last episode ever filmed, with Shusha Park being swiftly cancelled. Thankfully, this moment saw all parties involved survive the ordeal, a rarity in the world of disturbing television moments, though it does highlight just how quickly things can go downhill when the cameras are rolling, and when these dark moments ultimately happen, all we can really do is watch.
They better plan these things like perfectly. People have to plan these things like perfectly.
No water right now. Your 3-year-old daughter is what? De aquel suicidio que mencionamos al principio.
Where's the feud? I want to see the feud.
If there's one lesson you can, details might be
Buried. What? I don't want to look at that. Samson Stone. To Catch a Predator. Killers on TV. There's the feud. The feud. Yeah, there's the feud. Watch the feud.
online.
This guy buried.
There are very few manners of death that strike fear among us as much as the horrifying prospect of being buried alive. The dark, claustrophobic nature of it, slowly losing oxygen with not a thing in the world you can do to stop it. It just strikes a chilling chord with so many.
I'd rather be buried dead.
However, with this fear arose a unique opportunity for those looking to make a spectacle. Rather than running from this mortal fear, a select few magicians and daredevils have tried their hand at the challenge of being buried alive.
Like Mr.
by
Beast.
not just surviving,
Mr. Beast did that.
but escaping. The trick was popularized by arguably the greatest magician of all time, Harry Houdini, who tried his hand at the stunt on a few separate occasions, the first of which would see him narrowly escape a casket buried under 6 feet of dirt by breaking through the surface with his fist, only to fall unconscious before he could complete the trick, with the stunt almost ending in his death. From there, he would be buried again on 2 separate occasions, surviving both for well over an hour, but never being able to fully pull himself out, and in turn pull off the seemingly impossible. Houdini did have plans to give it one more try in 1927, when he believed the stunt would finally be completed, but sadly he would pass away before getting the opportunity. Because of this, the trick is acted as somewhat of a magnum opus for any magician able to pull off the feat, a feat that even the great Houdini himself couldn't accomplish. And so, on the 66th anniversary of his death, American escape artist Bill Shirk would honor the late magician by attempting to do just that. For the stunt, Shirk would add extra elements of flair, upping the danger by being handcuffed and having cement poured over top of the casket as opposed to just dirt. And he planned on doing it all with a TV crew on hand. However, from the get-go, things seemed to be
making my brain hurt.
As Shirk expressed concern over the grave being dug too wide and too long, thus changing the dynamics of his escape.
It's making my brain hurt.
At one point, when the first layer of dirt was being applied, Shirk would use his walkie-talkie to tell his team to call off the whole ordeal and to pull him up from the ground, seemingly in a moment of clarity.
Yes,
but everything was already in motion. This was his big moment with everyone watching. He couldn't afford to fail. Besides, he had been buried alive before, setting a record back in 1977 by spending a total of 79 hours beneath the surface of the Earth. He was no stranger to this, and not wanting to let his fans down, Bill Shirk would change his mind and continue the stunt by giving his team the green light to begin pouring the cement.
This is just
and as that concrete began to settle and harden over top of the casket, things take a very grim turn.
Did it stop doing stuff? On my recall, it's not really showing anything. Oh yeah, it's still rolling. It's just kind of my playback that sucks.
Decides to go ahead. I think we gotta go. Tons of concrete are poured. Suddenly, the concrete sinks. The coffin has been crushed.
Bro.
Almost immediately, the level of liquid concrete dips dramatically, and large bubbles appear on the surface, accompanied by a massive splashing noise. Signs that point to only one real possibility: that the weight of the concrete and dirt had caused the coffin
what was running
to cave
through
in,
this man's
with those
mind?
very same materials instantly filling in any available space inside the coffin, and in turn, suffocating Shirk. The rescue effort was underway almost instantly, but still, it felt like it was all moving in slow motion. And most assumed right away that if the weight of the concrete alone had not killed him, then the lack of oxygen certainly would.
A backhoe digs, and crucial moments pass. Shirk cannot be found.
However, this thankfully wouldn't be the case.
He did it.
Incredibly, Shirk managed to claw his way to the surface, where his team was able to pull him to safety and rush him into an awaiting ambulance. And though his condition appeared severe, he was alive and had somehow cheated death.
Thank God he...
This man's a legend, never mind.
This one, and it'll be a while before I'll do one of these, I'll tell you that.
Despite claiming to be done with his stunt for a while, Shirk would be back to attempting his death-defying stunts soon after, with some ending in similar results.
After Shirk climbs in the casket, the snake goes in first, but there's a problem, and Shirk has to get help.
God, a snake!
But although Bill Shirk was able to escape this trick with his life, not everyone has been so lucky. 2 years prior to Shirk's run-in with death, another performer known as the Amazing Joe had attempted the same stunt at an amusement park, also going the route of having dirt and wet cement poured over his plastic and glass coffin. This was Joe's attempt at becoming a master escape artist, and forever etching himself into the history books of this particular niche.
It's just like
in
that
fact, he
Zuza
had already
Park
done what
thing.
Houdini
You gotta.
couldn't, as years
These
prior
are the type
he
of
had
things you
escaped
have to
from
plan
a wooden coffin covered in 6 feet of dirt.
Absolutely perfectly. These are the type. You have to plan this stuff absolutely perfectly, or else somebody or something is going to happen, and you're cooked. You're cooked. That's the thing with live TV.
Clearly much more extreme, and with it should have come an immense amount of planning, not only by Joe himself, but the team around him. However, according to reports, the coffin used was never actually tested to see if it could withstand such a great amount of weight.
Exactly. These are the type of things you have to plan. You have to test the coffin first. A majority of these darkest TV moments were caused by human error. The guy in the mud in Japan. What was the one that came after that? The guy who was left alone and bashed his head into the floor. You could probably argue the same thing for Zuza Park too, because somebody had to handle like the electrical wiring of that spaceship. Somebody had to. They didn't test the coffin.
And also, he never tested the weight of the cement itself and the speed in which it would harden. Joe was quite literally going into this blind, and his confidence was apparent, as the cherry on top of this poor planning was the fact that no rescue procedure was in place should the stunt go horribly wrong.
They didn't even think of a plan B.
And unsurprisingly, well, that's exactly what would happen.
It was a cold night anyway, and when it sunk, I just knew trouble. We're in trouble. It's not fun anymore.
Much like the footage from Bill Shirk's attempted escape, the level of cement and dirt suddenly dips, only this time in a much more dramatic fashion, with the cave-in being so brutal that I'm not sure I'll even be allowed to show it on YouTube. According to many onlookers there, the coffin being destroyed by that immense weight caused a massive crashing noise, followed by immense panic from those trying to rescue Joe. But without a proper plan, the situation quickly grew helpless. Entrapped beneath that dirt, surrounded by cheering fans, his parents, and a TV camera, the amazing Joe would lose his life, ironically within a coffin buried 6 feet under.
Okay, well, at least they got the funeral costs covered, man. Shannon Stone.
Sporting events are no stranger to disturbing TV moments, from hockey players having their throats cut open,
folks, this is ugly. Richard Zedek is cut wide open,
to a football player suffering cardiac arrest right there on the field.
They have been administering CPR through these past 2 breaks that we've taken.
It's unfortunately always a risk in practically any televised sport out there, and although there's always a lingering chance that at any moment things could go terribly wrong, that risk mainly pertains to the players actually participating in the sport, and you likely wouldn't imagine fans being in any sort of danger as they sit by watching the game. Though sadly it does happen from time to time, with perhaps the most notable example being the story of Shannon Stone. Shannon was a 39-year-old firefighter who, on the 7th of July 2011, took his son Cooper to watch a Texas Rangers game in Arlington. This was the perfect bonding opportunity for the duo, and an even better opportunity to catch fly balls, as their seats left them in prime position to take home an unforgettable souvenir.
Does he get
the
hit by a ball?
Would stop at a sporting store beforehand, where Shannon would buy his son a baseball glove to use in the event that a loose ball came flying their way. And as the game reached the top of the 2nd inning, their moment had finally arrived.
That one blind but foul. When I look at who the A's are facing.
A foul ball was hit in their general direction, being quickly recovered by Rangers outfielder Josh Hamilton, and rather than returning the ball to the dugout or the field itself, Hamilton decided to make Cooper's day, recognizing the young fan in the stands and subsequently tossing the ball to Shannon. As this was all transpiring, the game continued with the pitcher preparing for his next throw, before suddenly you can hear the sound of something strange.
I want them to be great in their last
Exactly.
I would rather have that than have it like Holland where he gets knocked out.
It almost seemed like yelling, which was followed by some sort of strong reaction from the crowd, which in turn led to an immediate stoppage of play.
Did he get hit by
as
a
the
ball?
announcers were left trying to figure out what exactly was happening until they finally received word on the unfolding situation.
He's got a lot of energy built up. I think somebody fell out of the stands of left field trying to
Oh, they fell out.
field a baseball guy. Well, this is it. That's why there was time taken. Wow.
Well, the cameras caught it.
The man in this footage was in fact Shannon Stone, and as Josh Hamilton had gone to toss the ball up to him, the throw fell just a bit short, causing the 39-year-old father to extend past the railing before losing his balance. And despite the seemingly playful nature of the announcers at the time,
You were right, Ray. Somebody did tumble.
this fall was no laughing matter, as below that railing stood a 20-foot fall directly onto a concrete floor, which Shannon would strike head first.
Head
As
first?
he laid there on the ground, barely able to move, the man was miraculously still conscious, finding the strength to tell the rescue team carrying him out, "Please check on my son. My son was up there all by himself." Based on this reaction, it was clear that Stone was obviously alive and had clear brain function, making his initial prognosis on the scene somewhat promising. But before he would even reach a nearby hospital, Shannon Stone would be pronounced dead. According to many medical professionals, this immediate showing of brain function was more or less a fluke occurrence, and something they call a lucid interval, which is a window of conscious clarity after a traumatic injury, essentially meaning that although his ability to move and speak seemed to be a positive indicator, it was instead a sign that the injuries his brain had suffered were going to be fatal. In the years since, Shannon Stone's memory lives on with a statue being made in his honor in that very stadium where his life came to an end, forever immortalizing someone who, by all accounts, was a great man and an even better father.
They put a statue of him down?
We don't see or hear anything.
Yeah, and to cat.
If you spent any considerable...
Isn't this the show that caught EDP? Aren't these the guys who caught EDP?
amount of time here on YouTube, then chances are you're at least somewhat familiar with the show To Catch a Predator. During its run on Dateline, the show was incredibly popular, with its host Chris Hansen being launched into stardom for his role exposing pedophiles on the internet.
How you doing? Could you have a seat over in that chair, please?
At the time, there was really nothing else like this on TV, and was widely viewed as one of the most entertaining shows out there, which has caused it to find a second life here on YouTube, as re-uploads of its episodes have been viewed as many as 50 million plus times. To this day, the show remains immensely popular, and during its television run, the same was true, which led me to wonder how or why it was ever taken off the air. I mean, it was entertaining, popular, and with the internet exploding in recent years, the content would seemingly be endless. Yet somehow, this show only lasted 3 years. And that's when I realized that there's actually a very specific reason why To Catch a Predator was pulled from the air. And it's one of the darker TV stories I've ever heard. During the fall of 2007, Perverted Justice, the team that To Catch a Predator used to find their predators, had set up a decoy account on MySpace, posing as a 13-year-old boy. And before long, another user had taken the bait, reaching out to the fake child in the hopes of sparking an intimate relationship. According to the user's account, he was a 19-year-old college student that happened to live in the same area. However, upon doing some light digging, the Perverted Justice team discovered that the man was actually in his late 50s. His name was Louis Condrat, and although his behavior was similar to essentially all other predators in the show's run, sending explicit messages and pornographic images, despite knowing he was speaking to a child, Louis was different in one respect. It seems that Condrat was in a position of power, working as a chief felony assistant district attorney for Rockwall County.
They got the district
this was
attorney.
setting up to be To Catch a Predator's biggest catch to date, and exposing him would not only mean bringing him to justice, but also bringing in great ratings for the show.
They got the district
Though there
attorney.
was one major issue. Upon engaging the decoy for a few hours and even calling to speak to him,
Hello?
Hey, Will.
Hey, what are you doing?
Nothing. What are you doing?
Nothing.
No?
No, I was looking up to see how to get to...
So this guy could probably cook them if he
Thinking
wants.
about me?
Yeah, where's your right hand?
It's in my pocket.
In your pocket? And what are you doing with your right hand in your pocket?
Lewis stopped responding and seemed to recognize the grave error he was making and began deleting all content from his account. And as a few days passed, it was clear that Lewis was not going to be visiting their sting house, which meant no program and no justice. However, the To Catch a Predator team was not going to let this go easily, with the crew coming up with a plan that had never been done before in the history of the show. They were going to bring the program to Conrad. And so on November 5th, Hansen and his crew would visit Conrad's house with a group of officers and an arrest and search warrant. This would not be without controversy, though, as the warrant supposedly contained wrong information like the wrong county and the wrong date, meaning that they would likely struggle to hold up in court and probably should have never been acted on. Despite this, the crew urged law enforcement to act anyway, rushing the ordeal to assure they got their guy. And so the police agreed, first calling Conrad and then knocking on his door for multiple hours, though neither attempt saw any results. And growing impatient with the whole ordeal, they then called in the SWAT team to surround and eventually breach the house, which they would do around 3 p.m., barging into the home and surrounding Conrad at gunpoint. As this was all happening, To Catch a Predator had their cameras trained on the outside of the home, awaiting the shot of Conrad being ushered into a cop car and driven away, unaware that this time, things were going to end much differently. Inside, Conrad would yell to the officers, "I'm not gonna hurt anybody," before brandishing his pistol, and rather than pointing it at the officers, he instead pointed it at himself.
The officers line up in formation and head to the back of the house. Then we hear a faint crack. The officers force their way in. For almost 5 minutes, we don't see or hear anything. Then Lieutenant Adina Barber of the Murphy Police Department comes out and tells us what happened.
As they made entry, they confronted the suspect. I believe he's in the hallway, and he told them he wasn't going to hurt them. And then,
And he had a pistol in his hand.
This single gunshot would essentially mark the end of To Catch a Predator, as in the time following, NBC would be hit with a $105 million lawsuit from Conrad's own sister. And though this lawsuit was settled privately with undisclosed conditions, the show was already on death's door, which was not helped by the national media dogpiling on To Catch a Predator, as well as perverted justice.
But now there are serious questions about what goes on behind the scenes.
Whose sting was this? The police departments or the vigilantes hired by Dateline?
You don't have the full transcripts?
I don't know. That's exactly part of my problem. The police department can't tell me whether or not I have the full transcripts.
Did your arresting officers, did they see the chats before they made the arrest? In some cases, yes. Did they see the entire chats?
Making it impossible, says District Attorney Roach, to mount a successful
Honestly,
prosecution.
I don't...
Charges have been dropped against every single person arrested in the Murphy sting.
With these claims causing some to believe that the show was more interested in entertainment rather than justice. And whether that's true or not, To Catch a Predator would be cancelled, marking a tragic end to one of the strangest, yet most compelling TV shows ever to be broadcast, thanks solely to this
They had a reason, they just did it all wrong.
As evident by the first batch of cases in this video, many of the darkest moments in TV history come from shocking accidents or overall disturbing events that play out for the cameras to see. However, there are a select few examples where television moments only really become dark long after they're aired and more context is given. For example, in our first installment of the series, we discussed Bernard Spivey.
Ask him he's been married for how long?
Over 27 years.
Over 27
Look at him though, he look mad. You don't look happy, brother. You don't look happy.
63-year-old Bernard Spivey accused of killing his wife, 52-year-old Patricia Spivey, after an argument that turned deadly.
The man who had murdered his wife years after making an appearance on television, with one joke at his expense during this time aging like milk. The concept of killers finding their way onto TV is one that I've recently become fascinated by, with the case always being brought up in tandem with this conversation.
There's apparently a lot of guys who've killed, who've gotten on TV for some reason. I can't pull an example out of my head though.
being the dating game killer. In 1978,
The
a
dating
man
game
named Rodney
killer.
Alcala had found his way onto
That's
the
just
popular show The Dating Game, earning a date with Cheryl Bradshaw above all other contestants. However, this date would never actually materialize,
something-
as upon meeting him away from the cameras,
That's something
Cheryl
really
found the
I
man
wanna
to
be
be
called.
creepy, and ultimately declined to speak with him any further. And as it turns out, that decision may have saved her life. During the time in which this episode was shot and aired, Rodney was in the midst of a massive killing spree, ending the lives of at least 8 people that we know of, though many claim his true number of victims is shockingly closer to 130, due to the fact that they had found a stash of over 1,000 photographs detailing women, young boys, and men that Rodney had taken, many of which are believed to have been unidentified victims of him. And what makes this all the more chilling is the fact that Rodney had told the show that he was a photographer, and it was even mentioned during the program.
Well, let's see. Bachelor number 1 is a successful photographer.
I can't hear anything
His
saying.
father found him in the dark room at the age of 13, fully developed.
Play the audio
Given the
louder.
shocking nature of this case, it's really no wonder why it's become so popular, especially here on YouTube. But surprisingly, there are quite a few examples of killers finding their way onto our TV screens that have happened within the past decade alone. And one that even happened within just days of writing this script. One obscure example comes from the show Celebrity MasterChef, where in the background we can see an
Celebrity
inconspicuous
MasterChef.
man serving food cooked by the contestants of the show. The man was one of a dozen unnamed chefs, just helping out typically out of view of the camera. But for this one split second, and likely to the recognition of no one, we see him. This man's name is Stephen Port, a 40-year-old living in South London, who has since come to be
from
known
South
as
London.
the Grinder Killer. Stephen is responsible
The
for the deaths
Grindr
of
Killer.
4 men he met on the Grinder app, all of whom he had lured to his flat and poisoned with fatal doses of GHB, before going on to violate and then dump their corpses. With these murders transpiring not long after this fleeting moment was broadcast for the world to see, making me wonder just how many other killers have appeared in glimpses on TV that have not yet been recognized. Maybe they were walking in a crowd or panned over at a sporting event, hiding in plain sight.
This makes you think, you know? Really makes you think, you know?
But killers don't just get shown as background characters, or as one-off contestants for just a single episode. Sometimes they are permanently etched in the show's history. In the summer of 2020, Food Network began airing a season of Worst Cooks in America, one of their more popular shows, and this one was set to be a big one, as it marked the program's 20th season. The competition was all in good fun, with lots of humorous and memorable moments, leading to the eventual finale on the 2nd of July. And in that episode, the fan favorite Ariel Robinson would take home the crown as winner of the show, along with a grand prize of $25,000. However, if you were to look for this season today,
25K.
let's say on demand, on streaming services, or even on TV, you would be left with no results, as its existence has been practically wiped from the face of the earth. And given what happened after the season ended, this comes as little surprise.
So she killed a guy.
Upon winning the competition, Ariel Robinson settled back into her normal life with her husband, Jerry. And after securing life-changing funds from the show, the couple made the admirable decision to foster a young girl named Victoria, whom they eventually decided to officially adopt in January of 2021. On the 6th of the month, just over a week before the adoption was set to be finalized, Ariel would take to Twitter to boast about her parenting, stating, "I'm a mama bear and I'll do anything to protect my children and make sure their futures are equally bright." A statement that seemed in line with her already stellar reputation as being a fun-loving, good person who dedicated her life to loving her kids. However, no one could have imagined
she
the
seems good so
devastating
far.
turn this family was heading
But,
for.
You know, a devastating turn?
5 days after Victoria's adoption, Ariel's husband, Jerry, would dial 911, stating,
You have an emergency. Our daughter is unresponsive. She's drunk a lot of water. We're trying to pump, CPR to get out. Our 3-year-old daughter's choking on water right now.
What?
Your 3-year-old daughter is what?
Choking on water right now. We need help immediately.
Okay, we'll get help on the way.
This led to emergency responders rushing to the scene where the young girl was found unresponsive on the floor of her bedroom and was soon after declared dead. Across her body were countless bruises which Ariel claimed to have been from their attempts at CPR. Though bizarrely, during the whole ordeal, her story would quickly change, as she soon began blaming her 7-year-old son, whom she stated had a history of anger issues, believing potentially he had killed
this
her.
is a little
Already,
suspicious.
something very strange was happening with the situation, and it only became more bizarre when a forensic pathologist confirmed that Victoria had died not from choking, but from blunt force injuries and internal bleeding, essentially meaning that her death was no accident. This launched a full-scale investigation.
Somebody's got to
into
be
the
responsible
couple,
for this, and I
where
think
it
I know
would
who
be
it is.
discovered that on the day before her death, Victoria had gotten sick at church, causing Ariel to undress her and make her walk out of the building in just her underwear, telling her, "Oh, you're cold. You're cold. Girls that make themselves throw up deserve to be cold." This anger seemingly boiled over the next morning, where, ironically, Victoria was refusing to eat pancakes that Ariel had cooked, which led to Ariel grabbing her, dragging her up the stairs, and beating her with a paddle. According to Jerry, who was working in the backyard at the time, he could hear the beating from outside, claiming that it lasted almost an hour, though he did nothing to stop it. And as a result, Victoria began to bleed internally, and later would pass away due to the traumatic injuries she had suffered by the hands of her soon-to-be mother. When it was all said and done, Ariel Robinson was arrested and will now spend the rest of her life in prison, so soon after her triumphant win on Worst Cooks. Since the news initially broke on this, the entirety of Season 20 has been removed from the internet and has been wiped from the show's history. But for me, one of the most chilling moments in Ariel's history on television came soon after her victory, when a local news station would come to her home for an interview.
Now I truly am not the worst cook in America.
But she is the winner of Food Network's Worst Cooks in America Season 20.
Yes, I am putting mayo in a glove.
Ariel Robinson lives in Simpsonville.
We're inside. We see a sign proudly displayed by Ariel.
No shot. What?
Mom. Soon after, this same local news station would become the leading reporters on her murder case. Despite this all transpiring within just a few years, this surprisingly is not even the most recent example of a killer being prominently featured on TV, as news broke of this final example just days ago. In January of 2020, the widely popular show Family Feud featured the Bleefnick family, who would go on to win the episode and leave a few iconic moments in its wake, with the most relevant coming from this man, Timothy Bleefnick. During one of the segments, the question was posed, "What is your biggest mistake you made at your wedding?" To which Timothy responds with,
"Honey, I love you, but said I do."
Oh my god. That is brutal. That is brutal.
Not my mistake. I love my wife. I'm gonna get in trouble for that, aren't I?
That is brutal.
If you've seen the show before, you know that this type of humor is the norm.
He's
jokes
cooked
like
when he
this
gets
are made
home.
in virtually every single episode. But this one would later take on a much more sinister tone due to the events that unfolded not long after the show had aired. Around a year after Timothy's moment in the limelight, he and his wife Rebecca would actually separate, not officially divorcing, but living in separate homes and seemingly not getting along either, as it was recently revealed.
What was that noise? Whoa. What was that noise? What? What was that noise? Did something good happen? I don't know. I'll have to check on what happened later. But thanks, because I think that was good. That's a good thing, yeah.
That Rebecca had filed for a restraining order against both Timothy as well as his father, a clear indication that she believed her life was in some sort of danger. Fast forward to February of 2023, and the two were finally making headway on finalizing an official divorce, before on the 23rd day of the month, gunshots rang out from Rebecca's home.
Police say 41-year-old Rebecca Bleefnick was found by a family member Thursday. Police say she had been shot multiple times.
When police arrived on scene, Rebecca was sadly no longer alive. and it wouldn't take long for investigators to turn their sights on Timothy. On March 13th, police would arrest the now 39-year-old in connection with his soon-to-be ex-wife's death, charging him with 2 counts of first-degree murder and blaming him for the shooting that took place at her home, with his mugshot showing him as completely unrecognizable to the man we saw on TV just years before. The whole situation is incredibly disturbing, and what makes it even worse is just how beloved Timothy and his family were in their hometown. I mean, they literally had community watch parties to cheer on the family that can still be found here on YouTube.
Listen, it was so much fun. I'm so happy and appreciative of the support of the community, so thanks.
Making the events soon to come all the more tragic. And given everything that's happened since the show aired, and since Timothy said this iconic joke, I think it's very possible that there was at least some truth to his words.
Hi.
Our final entry takes us to the tragic passing of 15-year-old Yoandra Martine back in November of 1992. The young girl had recently discovered that she was 13 weeks pregnant, much to the disappointment of her family, and subsequently ended her life as a result, which momentarily thrusted her parents, Maritza Martin and Emilio Nunez, into the public eye. The two had been separated since before she was even born, with Maritza gaining full custody, something that Emilio would later claim she had used to keep his daughter away from him, as the two supposedly spent very little time.
I lost track of what I was doing. Martiza Martin.
Together. As a result, Nunez began publicly blaming Maritza for the death of their daughter, claiming that she and her new husband had been abusive towards her and had even struck her upon discovering she was pregnant. Making matters worse, Nunez would go on to allege that Maritza never even told him that their daughter had died and had only found out an hour before the funeral from a friend. Now, I want to stress that there is absolutely no information I could find to fully confirm any of what Nunez was claiming, and with many elements of Nunez's story, the jury is still out, though in his own mind, this truly seems to be what he believed, and this is where the dark side of television began to rear its ugly head. For whatever reason, the news station Ocorio Asi had decided to cover Emilio's allegations against Maritza, seemingly taking his word at face value and launching a full-scale story into the case. It started with Emilio being interviewed by a reporter from the station named Ingrid Cruz, which transpired in the vicinity of his daughter's grave. During the questioning, Ingrid would ask him things like, "What would you tell your daughter if she was still alive? And how did you feel when you saw your dead daughter in the casket?" Her questions were clearly crossing the line, and things would only get worse from here, as while they were filming this segment, Maritza herself had arrived on location to Yoandra's final resting place.
Doña Maritza.
Okay, that's a little personal. They're knocking on the car door.
Upon her arrival, Nunez immediately removed himself from the situation, and Maritza was instead swarmed by Cruz, who began bombarding her with questions, each of which were ignored, as she clearly was uncomfortable and didn't want to speak to the cameras, and was just trying to get to her daughter's grave.
Please, just let me go to the funeral. This is the problem with the news.
It's clear in the footage that tensions were rising by the second, as it seemed apparent that Cruz was clearly attempting to provoke her into any sort of reaction.
They could have done anything else. They could have reported on Cat of the Week.
The unthinkable happened.
Su hija tomó esa decisión de quitarse la vida. Usted no tiene nada que decir.
What are they doing?
In a split second, and out of absolutely nowhere, we see Nunez charge back into frame, as though he initially appeared to be doing the responsible thing by walking away from the conflict.
Oh, he went to grab his gun.
He instead actually returned to his car, with the sole purpose of retrieving his pistol, which he would then use to shoot Maritza over and over and over again,
he went to grab his
while the
gun.
camera was still rolling.
Live on camera again. What are these people committing murders live on camera, bro? You're cooked, your attorney's cooked.
Hey, get in the car. We just shot a woman, possibly coming after us. He's psychotic, man. Where am I? What funeral home am I at?
¿Cómo se llama esto?
The person who shot's probably cooked.
Maritza would be
news crew
shot a
probably needs
total of
therapy.
12 times, and in turn her life would come to an end.
Although
as
if
Nunez
you're
stood
working in
over
news in
her
general, you probably
yelling,
need
"I
therapy."
should have done this a long time ago." When the smoke cleared, Nunez would be arrested and sentenced to life with a possibility of parole in 25 years. And what's most frustrating is just how avoidable this really seemed to be. Maritza herself had actually requested a restraining order against Nunez not long before her murder, but was surprisingly denied, as police stated that it would only anger him more. With this happening despite the fact that police were already well aware of Nunez's violent temper, as authorities were literally called on scene for Yuandra's funeral, as Nunez had threatened to kill other members of the family. He was obviously a very troubled man,
So the
who,
police did
following the
nothing to
loss of
stop
his
this
daughter,
either.
needed
That's
help
great.
more than anything. Yet even after all this one news station decided to not only platform him, but to provoke him, right before the two had crossed paths, leaving us with one of the darkest
So it's
moments
the news'
to
fault,
ever transpire
basically.
in the history of television. I just wanted to let you guys...
Okay, so your conclusion for this one. Your conclusion. Actually plan things, and please don't kill people live on camera. Love of God, or else you're cooked. Your attorney's cooked. The person you shot is definitely cooked. Alright, we got 3 more editions of this, and we can also watch Eloa Pimentel and Joy Junction. But it's over now, so goodbye. I'll see you. If this picks up enough steam, then I'll probably do the rest of the videos in this series, but I'll see